Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Paulette Rigo, and yes, I'm the host of the Better Divorce Academy. And today we're going to talk about relationships and perhaps how to make them better with an expert, Dr. Lee Baucom. He has been helping people thrive, and I do love that word. It used to be the name of this podcast, the Thriving in Chaos Project, in their relationships and their lives for over 3 decades. That's a long time. I feel like I've been doing the same thing, but time has a way of passing quickly. He's the author of 7 books on these topics and is the creator of many online courses. Those include Save the Marriage System, gotta love that name, the Husband Bootcamp, can't wait to hear more about that, and he now has an app called Unpause. He's helped people around the world to live more thriving lives. And he's also been married 37 years, so he must be doing something right. So welcome to the show, Lee. I'm really glad you're here.
Paulette, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And by the way, it'd be 38 in August, and it's to the same person, just to say. It's not a cumulative count.
Well, you're doing something right, because being in a marriage that long, 37, 38, who's counting? Although if you're living it, you probably are. Although sometimes you forget. I'm
I do.
coming up on my 9th wedding anniversary this summer to husband number 2. And it's so hard to believe that it's gone by so quickly. Shocking. Sometimes we're like, wait, how long has it been? How did that happen? So regardless, congratulations to you and your
Thanks.
wife. That's a big accomplishment.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So let's start a little bit at the beginning of why you decided to write these books and do this work, because it's a very intimate thing to want to work with people regarding relationships and love and marriage. So what brought you to this work?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to be a therapist in college. And so when I got to grad school, the training was both as an individual therapist and then specifically I specialized in marriage and family therapy. And looking back, and by the way, then I left therapy after all of that training. After a couple of masters and a PhD, I went into coaching, which was really how I was doing therapy anyway. And we can talk a little bit about why that is in a minute, but I'll just tell you kind of
Yeah, I
how.
do want to do that. That's a
Yeah,
question I get a lot. What
yeah.
is the difference between coaching and therapy or counseling? So
Yeah, and
good point.
there are some specifics about why, especially in marital work, I shifted to coaching. So, but the reason for relationship work, the reason I settled on that was watching the destruction of poorly handled divorces in my extended family. Not my immediate family. My parents are in their 80s, I'm still in love, but watching an uncle do some pretty bad divorces and a couple of aunts do the same, I saw the ripple effect that really. I think they didn't see how far it would ripple, but 3 generations affected it. And really, the 4th generation, when I was working with couples, I realized that they were thinking about the kids they would have as they were getting married because of the lens of what had happened in their family. And that's a 4th generation. So I think that set for me at a very young age the importance of relationships and the importance of handling relationships and relationship endings in appropriate ways. Just factually, most people don't know how to do either. They're not really clear about how to build a great relationship, and certainly not prepared on how to take a relationship apart in a way that is less painful, not painless, but less painful and less destructive. So that's what kind of put me on this route.
So you had, as a kid or an adult, young adult, sort of witnessed the nightmare or the mess that you had witnessed and said, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, I was actually a kid, fairly young, and I have some cousins that it was so explosive or implosive, depending on what you want to look at. I don't even know where they are. The family split apart so badly that I have family members. I couldn't tell you where they are, and I've tried to find them. Just watching some really bad situations, and some of that was personality driven, which is I understood more when I did the individual training, but a lot of it was just relational lack of knowledge, lack of skills, and so that's where I stepped in, which is kind of where that coaching thing came in. I realized that therapists tend to try not to give advice by profession and that's not very helpful when people need advice that when they don't have a clarity. I had this training and realized that first, marriage therapy, even though it is like the automatic, what do you do when we're in trouble, has a very low success rate. And so that was discouraging. And that was, here I am preparing and supervision and not seeing great results. And the second was realizing that there are people who just need a roadmap. And as a therapist, that was not supposed to be my job. And roadmaps are how we figure out where to go anywhere in life. So that's a couple of reasons I shifted. But you raise the question of why therapy why coaching, not therapy? What's the difference? I think therapy especially with an individual, does a really good job of looking back on the problems that created where we are. Not so great a job on where are we headed. Coaching spends a lot more time of how do we move forward. And I don't want to draw it as this very distinct line. There are therapists who help people reimagine the future, and there are coaches who do a lot of time looking back. But generally speaking, therapy is kind of the how did you get here, and coaching is where do you want to get to.
This is a conversation I've wanted to have for 10 years. I couldn't agree more. Again, I'm not a therapist. I don't pretend to be a therapist. I don't play one on TV. I know my role. I stay in it. I'm very good at viewing or assessing a situation and deciding which bowl it goes into in the divorce journey. Is it more the psychological, mental, emotional side, or more the judicial, legal, financial, residential side? And there's a long path with those. And in the divorce, both of them matter, but at different times. And that's typically why divorce can become so contentious and expensive and long and dramatic, is when you take the two and you pour the bowl of emotions over the spreadsheet, or you crumple up the spreadsheet and throw it in the bowl of emotions. But coming back to that, those stages of grieving where you get to the stage 3 of negotiating and bargaining, and what is the first thing that people say to one another? Let's go to therapy. Let's go to counseling. Let's go to a family practitioner and see what we can do to maybe, analyze or assess or evaluate what's working and what isn't working. When one person wants to change and the other doesn't, or they both do or they both don't want to, that's a whole dynamic in therapy. But sometimes I would say most of the time, they come to me after they have failed in therapy, or the other partner just won't even consider it. I also see, what you've touched on, that the therapy is more about not necessarily giving them a roadmap or any guidance or clear positive steps out of the muck, but sort of looking at what has happened in the past to sort of get them to where they are right now, but not necessarily helping them get out of that stuckness and that feeling trapped and the heaviness that it comes about because of that. So it is hard. And I've seen some great therapists do a great job with it, but most of the time I don't hear great success stories. And that makes me sad, but it's a lot of a process of now educating yourself about what is the goal of therapy and what is the goal of coaching. And I think they're quite different.
They are. And so therapy, just to get to specifics, I do hear people saying, yes, I got something out of therapy. That's anecdotal, right? That doesn't stand the test of when we look at the statistics on that. Statistics are basically that 50% of people who go to marriage therapy still end up divorced. That's about the same as the general population. 10 to 15%, depending on what study they're looking at, say that it was helpful at all. So you go to a doctor and the doctor says, hey, you need this procedure. Got to let you know 50% of the people who have this procedure die, and only 10 to 15% find any improvement. That's not one I'm going to jump on. That's the statistics, though, because we haven't had better ways. I think our culture does a very poor job of preparing people to be married. Many people don't have a good role model in their home. They grew up with a broken family. And those who came from an intact family that doesn't mean that they saw the secret sauce that made the marriage work. And so even then, they often go in with a false sense of confidence because, they saw this good marriage. And honestly, I watch most people come into marriage with a false sense of confidence, period, because they think that they've already beat the statistics. I mean, if it's a 50-50 chance of making it through, and yet, every year we have so many people walking down the aisle, they do it because they think they already have this done. They beat the statistics, and they think it's because they have the love. And unfortunately, being in love is not what sustains a relationship. It is what starts a relationship, and then you got to do the work that is required, which is where I see lots of people. So I sometimes talk with people on a divorce podcast, and many people listening are already past that. And so in some ways, we're doing kind of a postmortem of looking back.
It can be, yeah.
And for some people, though, they're on the fence going, well, I don't know if anything's possible. And so for both of those, one of the things I often point to is where I see the beginning of problems. And this is true with a major exception. So here's my little disclaimer. There are toxic people in the world. And sometimes people choose toxic people, and no matter what they do, the toxicity is going to leak into the relationship, and it's going to make it a toxic relationship. So there is that. That's actually a pretty low percentage. So we're now talking kind of the ordinary everyday. And what often happens is somewhere early in the relationship, and I'm not saying the day after they get married or the day after their honeymoon, but at some point, they go, okay, we've got this. We've got our relationship. We've got this love. It'll carry us through. We'll get back to us after we do the parenting, do the career, do the hobbies, do the friends, do the on and on it can go. But so I call it hitting the pause button. You hit the pause button with the best of intentions that you're going to get back to us in the near future. And the near future is always just a little out from there. And so where you have spent all of this time in the early part of your relationship building up these habits of relating, of all the intensity you put into building that relationship, now you go, okay, after whatever it is, after the kids get to school, or they're out of diapers even, sometimes they think that, or they're into school, and then when they get into high school, and when they're out of high school, when they're out of college, and it goes on and on, when my career is here. Well, when it's here, because once you fall into the habits of disconnection, it's hard to break into reconnecting. And so any relationship is only doing one of two things. It's either growing and expanding or shrinking and dying. And you hit the pause button, and that's starting the process of shrinking and dying. And the reason that most people don't recognize that is because the momentum that they had coming into this, and we talked about the fact that they thought they had already beaten it, they have some momentum coming through, and it'll carry them for a while, but not indefinitely. And so the disconnection begins to eat away at the relationship. So barring the toxicity, that's the root cause of why most marriages end up getting into trouble. People don't know how to pull out of that tailspin.
And it's like a whirlwind, right? Like a drain. It's hard to pull yourself out, right? Once you hit that pause button, it's a habit.
Well, and first, people don't recognize it. When they start recognizing it, the damage has already begun to set in. You don't know you're doing it because that love felt so intense. That love felt like it would sustain. And then you do little things like, oh, we're parenting together. Like, you refer to each other as the parents, not as the spouses. That's a change. And so when you're saying mom and dad to each other, and you're already noticing that change in your identity.
Yeah.
Many times there's also we need to get to this point. To have what we want, we have to get to this point in the career. And when I say this, I have people say, I don't have the time that I had before. You put a lot of energy into building the relationship. I don't have that time to put into this. So if you're saying I shouldn't work, shouldn't parent, shouldn't whatever, my point is not that. My point is that the priorities restack. And the loser in it is often the marriage relationship. Not that the marriage relationship has to take all the time in the world, but it needs some of the time. It needs some of the attention and some of the connection.
Beautiful. I hope everyone's taking notes. I did want to point out, too, that we begin as a couple to believe that, like you said, love, we have the love that will sustain us and get us through it, or no matter what. But most young people also don't realize that, yes, love is an essential ingredient in a relationship. But if you do in fact decide to get engaged and married, and it's now a legal binding contract. It has nothing to do with romance and love, and how big the ring is, and what color the dress was, and what flavor cake you had, and where you went on your honeymoon, and how many guests came, and the fantasies and the head of the couple, of the romance, the engagement, the wedding, the courtship, and of course now building a life together. Yes, that can all be beautiful on Instagram and TikTok and what used to be known as bride magazines. Don't know if they're still out there as much as they used to be, but notice there are or were many, many bride magazines, but there are no divorce magazines. I think there's one actually now, but
And no marriage. There's lots of
no
marriage
marriage
books,
magazines,
but
right?
people have a very hard time of taking action until they realize there's a problem. And by
Correct.
the time people realize it, the damage is already setting in. And so, if we kind of extend that a little bit,
Yeah.
what I realize is that people are most aware of their own personal pain. If I am working on some project and I hit my hand with a hammer, the whole world is reduced to my hand, not anything else around me. And the same is true when we feel the rejection from our spouse, even though it's often a mutual disconnection, not a rejection, but a disconnection. So the disconnection feels like rejection. And we're usually thinking that we're doing what we can to further this, and the other person is not. So then we start to get into the hurt. And hurt registers in our brain. The emotional hurt registers in our brain just like the physical pain does. It's just like hitting the hammer. That same part of the brain lights up. And what do we do if we are hurting? We try to find a way past the pain. And that's where we start seeing people finding their connection somewhere else, being overly invested in the kids, in the career, in the friends, in activities, hobbies, or somebody else outside of the marriage. All of those are attempts to find connection somewhere because we humans are so connection driven. So many times when I talk with people who are either contemplating or in the midst of divorce, and I point that out, they go, "Oh yeah, I can look back and see that." And that's a painful realization. But it also means that you have a different lens to use now, a different way of understanding where things are, and maybe even what's possible.
Beautiful. I hope you're taking notes, everyone. I am. What a beautiful conversation here. So tell me a little bit about the Husband Bootcamp. What is that?
I believe that most people are looking to do better in relationships. There comes a point when there is no do better for this relationship, but I think most people want to do better in relationships. They just don't know what to do. And I heard from lots of men who felt very unprepared to step into that role of being husband. That was what we decided to do, is create a boot camp, so a daily process. We're actually in the process of making that into an app, just like I did with the Unpause app, so it's more accessible on a phone. And it's basically a daily training for the month to get people up to speed on what skills you do need. And my big thing is, where are the skill deficits? How can we add in a roadmap? Lots of people find themselves wanting to do something different. So there's a formula I've kind of really taken in. Charles Snyder created back in the 80s called the Hope Formula. And he said that hope requires three things. And this is true anywhere in life. So if you're looking at how to thrive, you can plug this in. If you're looking at marriage, even a divorce, how to have a good divorce. So all of this fits for this. And so you have to modify the pieces, but those three pieces are true, period, if you want to have hope. The reason I found this to be an interesting equation is way back at the beginning of my career, my supervisors would go, they've got to have hope. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I help them have hope? Well, they just got to have hope. That's hard to actualize. I mean, that's just to hope yourself. That's a wish. That's not hope. So here's the equation, three pieces. The first one is you have to know where you want to go. What do you want to get to? And so if you're working on a marriage, to know what you want that marriage to be about. And it's probably different than the one you're existing in. Otherwise, you hope accomplished, right? You've already arrived. And so it's, do I want one that's loving and connected, and one that's respectful, and one that we both treasure? That would be a pretty good scenario. For divorce, can we leave in ways where we part company in healthy ways? Maybe we co-parent together if there are kids involved, that we do things that are fair and not adversarial. That would be a place to hope. So we have where we want to move towards. The second thing, well, let me jump to the third thing, actually, because I think that the second one will make sense on what I've tried to do in these processes. The third piece is, am I willing to do what it takes to get there? Am I willing to step forward? Because no matter how big the goal is, if you're like, yeah, I'm not taking a step, it's just wishful thinking. Nothing's happening. So you have that piece where the realistic question, am I willing to do what it takes? Am I willing to put in the effort? That's the third piece. The second piece is, do I know how to get there? And so when people are looking, for instance, do I know how to have a good way of going through a divorce? That is part of what you're trying to do with Better Divorce Blueprint, right?
Most people don't. Yeah.
They need a roadmap. And so that is what you're trying to create there. I've done the same with Save the Marriage, with Husband Bootcamp, with the Unpause app, of saying, I get that you may not know how to get there. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the steps to follow. Let's have a roadmap. So we'll make the whole hope thing into a trip. So let's say I decide I want to go to the beach, which is pretty typical for me to want to go to the beach. And so that's where I want to go. And I can, if I go outside and I go, I just want to go somewhere. Well, I can go anywhere, but is it going to be what I want? So I have to pick a goal. My goal, get to the beach. Got that. I'm willing to drive. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I will drive it. Got the third piece. I need to know how to get there. I need a roadmap. GPS. I'll plug it in. That'll give me the route. Now I could look at it and go, I wish that was closer, but the reality is I'm where I am. And that gives me the path. That shows me how to do it. So wherever we are in life, those three pieces give us a formula of starting with, where do I want to go? Am I willing to do what it takes to get there? And do I know how to get there? If we have those three pieces, we have not just hope, but a process to arrive there. So the boot camp is that for men who want to be better husbands. The Save the Marriage system is that for people who realize that their marriage is truly in trouble and they want to get there. My books are the blueprints for how to have a thriving life. The Unpause app is, how do you move past that pause button to get to the relationship you do want?
Beautiful. So you talk a little bit about this pause button, right? This, should we say, did you say it was Unpause? Yeah, Unpause app and a pause button. Is that only applicable in the early stage? When both parties decide that does it take two to tango? I guess is how I'm looking at it, right?
Which is a good question, but so does it take two to tango? Yeah, but you're already doing the tango. I mean, that was the whole process of forming your relationship. You may not like the dance you're doing now. Mm-hmm. Can one person change the steps that they're dancing? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But the tango's already going. That is until you divorce. And at that point, you should be stopping your tango with each other and trying to figure out where to go from there. But in this process, all of my material is built so that one person can start taking action. Now, just to be clear, the one person can start taking action to try to rebuild. One person alone cannot indefinitely save a marriage. It's not possible, but you can start the process. And in fact, that's how any change starts, of one person going, I don't like how this is. I'm going to do something different. So wherever it is, even if somebody, very rarely is it in a marriage that one person says, I want to end this, and the other is like, yeah, I'm right along with you. When that happens, that's usually a very easy process.
I can mediate that in 4 minutes.
Right. Let's split it evenly and say goodbye. But that's not what happens. Somebody's going, I want out, and the other's going, no, don't want that, and they start fighting for that. Same in a marriage. One person can say, I want to improve our relationship, and the other person may go, I think we're just in a phase, or I'm okay with the way
Oh,
it
it's fine the
is.
way it is, right? Yeah.
And so then
Well,
it's a
what's the
question of,
problem? There's no problem. I
yeah,
don't see a problem. Yeah.
which is basically I have gotten used to the habits we are in. I don't know how to disturb that. But it's not the end point. And the reason it's not is because we humans really need connection. Not just something that would be nice to have, but we need connection. It's wired into our DNA. So because of that, when we start getting connection back into the relationship, that often will kind of snowball into more and more connection, because the person goes, oh, you know what? I remember this. This feels good. This is something that we used to have. So it's not, we all have some muscle memory from this. Once you've gotten to the point where you want to be married, so you've got the muscle memory somewhere in there. You just have to kind of reactivate it. So like riding a bike, everybody says it's like riding a bike, you never forget. Well, I can tell you, having watched people who haven't ridden a bike in 10, 15, 20 years, it is like riding a bike, because that is a very awkward thing to do. You just have some residual muscle memory to rely on, so it comes back faster than what you're doing in the beginning. You already have some pieces, and many people underestimate just how much kind of muscle memory there can be once you start trying to rebuild connection.
Yeah, riding a bike. I didn't ride a bike for a long time, got back on, and it did feel a little awkward for a bit. But you talk about three areas of connection. What are they? I'm curious.
Yeah, so it's three levels, and it's not like you go from level 1 to 2 to 3. It's three levels that are all true all the time. So the first level is physical connection. And usually when I say that in a group, especially if they're in a troubled relationship, they go, oh, you mean sex? And the answer to that is no, but yes. Yes, that is a part of that, but no, it's not all of that. Any loving touch is that physical connection. We share this style of connection with pretty much warm-blooded creatures. Clementine, my dog, is sleeping soundly beside me, but if she had the chance, she would be right up against me, because she understands physical connection, right? She wants to be close by. And so that's what those warm-blooded creatures understand as connection point. That's warmth and protection. We share that with them. So loving touch, hug, a kiss, pat on the leg, holding hands, whatever it is, whatever level that is physical connection. The second one is emotional connection. Now, this is not where we switch from physical nonverbal to verbal. It's partly nonverbal. So as we've been talking, you've been nodding your head, and I have been when you've been talking, because we're in sync on what we're talking about, right? So you're basically saying, okay, I get what you're saying. That's nonverbal. So if my wife is telling me about her day and it's something hard, I can nod appropriately, and just by being clear to be looking at her, that's nonverbal communication. I get you. I understand. And so the other piece of that, though, is verbal. And what we're communicating at that level is that we get each other. I get you, you get me. And that I get you, you get me is based on I also accept who you are and you accept who I am. That's that emotional connection. Then there is the layer of I support you and you support me. That piece of feeling supported in hard times and in great times. That's the other piece. So I get you and I support you. You get me, you support me. That's that emotional connection. That's the second level. The third level is spiritual connection. When I say that, people go, oh, you mean religion? And my answer is no, but yes, because religion is part of our core values. It represents some of our core values, but so do a lot of other things. So when couples talk about what are their goals, what are their hopes, what are their dreams, what are their fears, that's all that spiritual connection. Here's the interesting thing so I used to see a lot of premarital couples. If they were getting married in 7 places in the town that I worked, they had to come through my office for 3 visits. And they always told me the story of how they fell in love. And it almost always included this discussion that started late at night and went for hours, where they talked about their childhood, their, kind of what they grew up in, what they hope for, where they're headed, all of those very deep pieces that they might not have shared that level with anyone else. And that's where they fell in love. They didn't know to label that. I was sitting there going, okay, that's spiritual connection. Now I get how important that is. And then couples stop having those conversations. That is a purely verbal process. I can't get somebody to understand my core values and what's big for me, my dreams, unless I'm sharing that verbally. And yet that's one of the ones that drops away for lots of couples. So the three levels, all of them important, all of them critical, and all of them part of that disconnection. One of them, some people don't even recognize was there until they recall that kind of conversation.
Well, this is a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad we found each other. I can see that you've been a great service and help to so many people, of course, with all of your decades of work, but also through your works and authoring. I invite everyone to really do a little bit of research on Save the Marriage System. And if you're a guy out there that's looking to make your marriage healthier, perhaps you can consider the Husband Bootcamp. And maybe, Dr. Lee, you'd consider having a wife bootcamp, but I'll just plant the seed there. And the Unpause app, I can see very strongly how married couples can, as I like to say it, stay together for the children. You know, that kind of like pause of step back. We're on autopilot. We've got to just do this and work, the house, the kids, the neighbors, sports, travel, and then, oh, I'm married? Yeah, it is a problem. And those three levels of connection are not always nurtured equally. And that's a problem when you find that you're losing that connection with your spouse. I see that a lot when I do coaching work, because the average amount of time that I work with people before they tell their spouse they want a divorce is 2 years. And that's a long time, and that's the average time. You know, there are some people I work with longer. Some call me and say, how quick can you get this done? But most people do a lot of thinking, research, Googling, chat GPTing now. I don't know if that's a word, but I guess it is now. Just researching. Back in the day, I used to spend hours in the bookstore, if anybody remembers what that was like before we had the internet, because I'm a constant learner and I wanted to really do my homework and research. But it is overwhelming at times when you don't know that you have the right support system and roadmap and you don't know where you're going. Marriage can be beautiful, but it can also be very difficult and painful if you don't have that connection. So I'm glad that we've had this conversation. What is the best way for people to learn more about you?
So if you're kind of going, I'm not sure if we're really that deep in trouble, or you're needing to unpause, I have a page that has 3 things on it. So I'm assuming at that point they're not ready for you, Paulette, to finish them with their divorce,
fine.
right?
No rush. Yep.
That's right. There's all, and my feeling is, can we get people to the place where they go, okay, I don't have regrets. I feel like I did what I needed to, right? And that's a great place
I've done all my
be.
homework, due diligence. Yeah.
Yep. And if there was effort still needed, did that. Look in the mirror and go, yep, I feel good. But that's savethemarriage.com/podcast. Since we're sitting here talking on a podcast, savethemarriage.com/podcast. That has a link to the Unpause app. If you're at the point where you're like, maybe we just do need to unpause, or Save the Marriage if you're going, okay, one last ditch effort to really see if there's a turnaround. And there's also an assessment there to see just how difficult it might be to make a change. And all of those are on that one page.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a great way to start our spring season. This year has been a good milestone for me, and proud to say that so many more people are finding me and learning that there is a better way. And I'm also proud to say I've saved quite a few marriages myself. It was not my intention. I do not, assume that it's possible. But when they do this work and they kind of learn, the top reasons couples divorce and how many of them they have, how many they don't have. And if both parties are both willing, it is possible. It isn't always my goal as a divorce professional, but with people like you and your expertise and not throwing in the towel too soon, And having no regret. I couldn't agree with you more. You never want to look back at this and say, I guess I gave in too soon. But divorce, marriage can be very painful too if you stay in too long, and being, not using psychological diagnosis terms, but trauma bonded and codependent, and really feeling enmeshed in a relationship that can be very dysfunctional, abusive. Be careful with that. That's really where you need to get some serious help too. So if you are truly in a relationship that feels very dysfunctional and very controlling and abusive, and if you feel unsafe too, that's a different conversation than if you feel, just like, well, we don't really pay attention to each other and we're both busy. It's a very different conversation than going down a much deeper, darker road. So know that you have the experts out there to help you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. I'm glad you're
Thank you.
here.
Thanks.
And reach out to him and follow his work. And until next time, everyone, you know how to find me, Better Divorce Academy. I wish I could make it the best divorce, but I can make it the better divorce. So I'll see you soon. Until next time, bye-bye.